It's week 10. It's the Panthers. It's the Giants. It's Munich, Germany, and two 2-7 teams facing off early over in the East Coast. We're going to break it all down right here on this Locked On NFL crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Giants.
You are Locked On NFL crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers and Locked On Giants podcast. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can get Panthers and Giants coverage every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Today is Crossover Thursday here on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Giants. Crossover Thursdays presented by our friends over at PrizePicks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. I'm Julian Council, the host of Locked On Panthers. She is Patricia Trana, the host of Locked On Giants. And the Panthers and the Giants are facing off on Sunday morning there on the East Coast here in Munich, Germany, where I sit right now, Patricia, as we're having this conversation a little bit earlier in the week than we would like, but our schedules just didn't necessarily align the way we wanted them to. How are you doing, and how are you feeling about this 2-7 matchup of these two teams on Sunday here in Munich?
Well, first off, Julian, it's good to see you as always. Secondly, I'm glad that it's an early game. My listeners know the earlier the games, the better, the more I like them. But yeah, we're in for a barn burner this weekend. I mean, 2-7 teams that this year are going nowhere, that this year have a lot of questions, more so than answers. It's going to be the battle of the bad, I guess. And, you know, the question is who's going to be slightly better than the other one? You know, it's a toss-up. The Giants are favored. In this game, I think it's 5.5 points is the line. The first time they've been favored in almost 2 years. So, wow. Yeah, it's going to be, I don't want to say a fun one. It's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, certainly be interesting. And hopefully for all the folks who are making the trip from the States over here to Munich, like myself, and all the folks even in Europe, the NFL fans that are coming to Germany to watch this game, will watch at least an entertaining battle between two teams that are certainly evenly matched as they both sit here at 2-7. There are some interesting storylines, some Charlotte connections. Daniel Jones from the Charlotte area, went to Charlotte Latin High School, played at Duke University, getting to face off against his hometown team again. Brian Burns, that factor as well. The Panthers made that big trade back in March to send him to New York, and they've been able to use some of those picks to help them hopefully in the future. But looking at this game on Sunday, offensively for the Giants, what's the biggest storyline you're looking at heading into this Week 10 matchup?
Yeah, I think the biggest storyline is probably make or break for Daniel Jones. You know, all year long, there have been questions if the Giants get off to a lousy start, how long do they continue with Daniel Jones, who has that injury guarantee staring them right in the face? For those not aware, Daniel Jones will collect $23 million guaranteed of next year's $30 million salary if he cannot pass a physical next spring. And given the fact that Daniel Jones has an injury history, people are worried that injury guarantee is going to trigger. Now, here's the thing, though. The Giants head coach, Brian Daboll, feels that Daniel Jones give the team the best chance to win. All right, which is kind of a sorry state of affairs a sorry statement on the rest of the quarterback room, if that's what you feel. The question now becomes is if the Giants lose to the Carolina Panthers, and, you know, despite the fact that they are favored, there is still that possibility because they just are in a 4-game losing streak right now. Do you pull the plug on Daniel Jones after this week? Because now the Giants have a bye week after this game. They come back, and then it's going to be bang, bang. They're going to have the Thanksgiving game at Dallas, which has their own problems. Do you make the change, or do you just say, you know what, we're going to ride it out with Daniel Jones. We're going to keep rolling the dice and hope that he stays healthy and hope that we get something started and show our locker room that we're not necessarily throwing in the towel on the season, even though the record would kind of indicate that the season is done.
Yeah, I think both seasons right now for these two teams are lost. And you think about the Daniel Jones situation, like that's pretty interesting. We saw it play out in Denver with Russell Wilson, where they decided they didn't want to risk it. They benched him. He was able to get his way out, and now he's at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and things are working out for him. Things are also working out with Denver as they have Bo Nix. I'm curious, what is the Giants' plan if they do decide to pull the trigger there on Daniel Jones, decide to bench him, knowing that John Mara, who's the owner there in New York, decided, or at least he came out about 2 weeks ago and said that he expects that Brian Daboll and Joe Shane back there next season. It's not like this is the best quarterback draft class coming up. Carson Beck threw 3 more interceptions on Saturday at Georgia. He was considered to be one of the top quarterback prospects. You look at Quinn Ewers, he's been banged up. I don't look at any of these quarterbacks and think that that's someone who's going to come into a franchise and instantly turn things around. So what direction do you think they go in if they do decide to sit Daniel Jones the rest of the way?
Well, I think what the fans would like to see is Tommy DeVito, who right now is the third quarterback. Tommy Cutlets, Tommy Cutlets. Drew Lock is the backup to Daniel Jones, but Drew Lock, quite honestly, good guy, but just hasn't really looked all that much better, given the talent that's on offense. So I think a lot of people want to see Tommy DeVito. They feel that, the Jersey-born Tommy DeVito will re-energize the crowd, re-energize the franchise. That is, of course, the segment of the fan base that wants to see the team be fun again to watch. Now, of course, you have others who say, you know what, leave Daniel Jones in there or play Drew Lock because we need all the losses we can get to improve the draft pick. I think the Giants right now are, 7th in the draft order? And if they continue losing, they're going to move up the draft order and have a chance at one of the quarterbacks. And you mentioned that, this year's quarterback class maybe not as strong as last year's. And that was something, Julian, that I was screaming about last year. I felt that the Giants should have taken a quarterback, even if it had been on day 2. Take someone, start developing him so that if you were going to move on from Daniel Jones, you had a guy who was basically ready to step in. And if you weren't, you could always trade him, kind of like what the 49ers did with Trey Lance, trading him to Dallas to recoup draft picks. So I just feel like the Giants really missed the boat on that one.
Yeah, you're right. Tankathon.com right now, our favorite website here on Locked On Panthers, at least this time of the year. The Panthers sitting there 4th overall and the Giants sitting there at 7th. There are 9 teams, Patricia, that have 2 wins in the NFL. So it's going to be a battle to get the number 1 overall pick in a draft where I don't know how much value the number 1 overall pick is actually going to have. So interesting things happen up there with Daniel Jones. Plenty of people, I'm sure, listen to this podcast, knowing he's a Charlotte guy, hoping the best for him. I don't think anyone wants to see him here in Carolina, though, based off how he's played so far with the Giants. Looking on the defensive side of the ball, how are things playing out? Brian Burns, that was a big acquisition the Giants made this past offseason. The Panthers have struggled defensively, especially in the pass rush, and I wonder how many fans who were happy to see him go are now wishing he was still a Carolina Panther. What's the big storyline on the defensive side of the ball heading into this game on Sunday?
Well, the Giants defense needs to have a rebound game. Last week against the Commanders, they were the problem. All right. So, and it was kind of shocking, to be honest with you, because the defense had played relatively well. The run defense is still kind of not fixed where it needs to be. And that's because they just don't have enough depth, in my opinion, on that defensive line to accompany Dexter Lawrence, who's right now playing out of his mind. He's like all world. Should be defensive player of the year in my estimation. Whether he gets it because of the team's record, that remains to be seen. But the Giants defense last week, from the front to the back, the pass rush, 0 sacks, 2 quarterback pressures against Jaden Daniels. The defensive secondary, which was a major question mark for the Giants coming into the season, they played pretty much a bad game. Across the board, they were bad. I think they had only 2 pass breakups. This team can't get an interception to save its life. I don't know why that is, but they can't. So, just the defense needs to have a rebound game. And, you mentioned Brian Burns. That guy, what a warrior he's been. He is playing with a very bad groin injury, as well as he has a biceps and Achilles. He is hurting. He is hurting. But, he goes by that nickname Spider-Man, and he takes pride in that, that moniker. And he's like, superheroes don't have time to sit and nurse injuries. And I'm like, I admire him. I respect the guy for going out there. Even though the season is lost, he could easily say, you know what, let's call it a day. I'll be back next year, healed up, ready to go. But no, he wants to be out there. and he wants to do his part. And you know what? The numbers might not be eye-popping, but he has had a positive influence on the defense, on the pass rush, opening things up for others.
Yeah, and I look at his career. He's not a guy who missed a lot of time in Carolina either. He only missed one game back in 2020. He missed a game back last year with the concussion. It was that Thursday night game against Chicago. Other than that, he's played in every single game, and he had a broken wrist back his rookie year. And that's just a passion he had. He punched the ground, broke his wrist. You don't want to see that, but it's a rookie mistake. But he still came out there and was able to play. So he's someone who's always been a team guy. I wish the best for him. It's unfortunate that he leaves one bad team to go to another bad team that's trying to figure out their quarterback situation, who's going to be their head coach and GM moving forward, and just want the best for him. Spider Burns, we miss him here in Carolina, and he's going to be a good one in New York, and hopefully for his sake and for the Giants' sake, they can turn things around. But hoping out starting on Sunday in this matchup between 2-7 teams here in Munich as the Panthers and Giants face off. So that's the Giants side of things. Let's take a look at the Panthers side of things as Dave Canales is not willing to tell us who the quarterback's going to be. Is that gamesmanship? Is that really him wanting Andy Dalton to be the guy moving forward? I hope it's not the case. We'll talk about it here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Giants on this Locked On NFL crossover Thursday. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break down this byproduct. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly and you'll feel your best tomorrow morning. Here's how it works. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. Step 2, drink responsibly, or at least try. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On NFL at checkout. ZBiotics is back with 100% money back guaranteed. So if you're not satisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. All right, back here on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Giants. It's a Locked On NFL crossover Thursday presented by our friends over at Prize Picks. It's Panthers, it's Giants, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time here in Munich, Germany, where I sit right now talking to Patricia Charana of the Locked On Giants podcast. 3:30 local time, so kind of nice, a little in between. We don't have 3:30 games in the NFL. We have a lot of those in college, but it's typically, of course, 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and then if you're good enough, you play in prime time, which the Panthers will not be playing a prime time game at all this season. This is their prime time game, a 9:30 game over on the East Coast against the Giants. And Patricia, their quarterback questions there in New York about Daniel Jones and whether they're going to sit him for the rest of the season. The question here in Carolina is who's going to be the quarterback for the rest of the season, as the Panthers head coach Dave Canales was not willing to answer that question on Monday. And I don't know how you feel from an outsider's perspective, but to me, it seems pretty clear that you're 2-7. Bryce Young, you traded all those picks to get him. He's only started 20 games so far in his career. Why go back to 37-year-old Andy Dalton, who's not even under contract and going to be the future for this team next season? Like, I don't know how you feel, but it seems pretty clear Bryce Young to be the quarterback.
I agree. I mean, look, I get it. Bryce Young has struggled. You know, he's had different coaches, different systems that he's had to deal with. The supporting cast around him hasn't been great. But, you know, you're right. You make this investment in him, you know, give him a chance to work it out. I mean, look, the season's lost anyway. You know, worst case scenario, you keep losing, you improve your draft pick stock or your draft slot, you know, and I think a lot of, you know, fans at this point would sign up for that, you know, especially if it means they can get a better player to help them. But you've got to find out if Bryce Young is your guy moving forward. And if you sit him on the bench for a veteran, that's not, you know, you're not helping yourself. I mean, you know what Andy Dalton can do. He's been doing it for a long time. You know what he brings to the table. But you're right, 37 years old. How can he possibly be your future?
Yeah, and we've seen over the last couple of weeks when Andy Dalton was healthy before he had that car accident, thank God, that the only thing that came out of that was a sprained right thumb, which is unfortunate for him because he was getting another opportunity to play football. But outside of the Raiders game where he was outstanding, and then the Bengals game in week 4 where he played pretty well there too, wasn't great against the Bears, wasn't great against Commanders, wasn't great against Atlanta. It's not like the offense has just been blazing since he's taken over. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to go back to him unless the Panthers are just done with Bryce Young. And that's what it'd be telling me. If they watch Bryce improve from that game against Denver in week 8 to how he played week 9 against the Saints, albeit a bad Saints team, which the Panthers also not a good football team, but you saw that growth. You saw that development. If you move on from him and go back to Andy Dalton, then clearly this is a guy you want to get rid of. I don't think 20 games is enough for me and for the organization to know definitively that Bryce Young is not the guy. Now, history shows that if you bench a guy who's on his rookie deal, that typically you're not going to keep him around, especially a guy who's a first-round pick. And Anthony Richardson and up there in Indianapolis, an example of someone who may be out the door, but we saw Zach Wilson in New York. It did not work out with him. Trey Lance in San Francisco, as you mentioned earlier, did not work out with him. It's just there's so many cases recently where I don't know whether it's a quarterback development problem or just a lack of patience problem in the NFL. But if you don't show it immediately, these teams don't give you a chance. But they should give Bryce Young 28 starts. So meaning starting on Sunday and starting the next 7 games after this. And to be honest with our listeners right here, our viewers, we're doing this on Tuesday. It's 5:18 here. It's 11:18 where you're at. So we have not heard from Dave Canales on Wednesday, the day before you would be able to watch and hear this podcast. So we're not sure whether he decided to answer it. He did say on Monday it was a little bit of gamesmanship. That may be a factor. I don't believe it is the factor as far as the decision that they're trying to make. It should be Bryce Young. Will it be? That is certainly the question that we're all trying to figure out and see whether that's the case on Sunday. Because at least for me, I don't know about you, Patricia, I'm far more interested in watching Bryce Young versus Daniel Jones than Andy Dalton versus Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. And, look, to your point about Dave Canales maybe keeping this on the wraps for competitive purposes, look, the Giants aren't stupid. I know Giant fans are going to disagree with me and they're going to say, yes, they are. Look at all the bad decisions that they've made. But they're going to prepare for both quarterbacks because you never know. In this league, you got to prepare for all the quarterbacks because you never know. A guy could start, get injured, and now all of a sudden you got to put the backup in. So every team prepares for multiple quarterbacks. Maybe they do a little bit more preparation for the guy who's the clear-cut starter, but if you're not preparing for all the possibilities at quarterback, then you don't have any business being in the NFL as a coach. So, really, what does Dave Canales stand to gain from not announcing it when it's pretty obvious that every coach is going to, like I said, the Giants are going to prepare for both. And as you said, the Panthers are coming off a big win. Why would you disrupt that? What kind of message are you going to send to your locker room if you say, okay, Bryce, good job, buddy, but take a seat. We're going to start Andy, even though you won last week.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Robert Hunt, who was the big free agent signing for the Panthers at right guard, he was in the locker room on Sunday talking about how Bryce looks so confident. Chuba Hubbard, who's been outstanding at running back this season, talked about that as well. These guys are gaining more respect for Bryce Young. Like, honestly, in the beginning of the season, you see a lot of times these guys get voted on as captain just because of the quarterback, but are they truly the leaders of this team? And we saw when Bryce was benched and the way that the team responded, just energy-wise and production-wise, when they face off against the Raiders in that win, they didn't believe in Bryce Young. But I think over the last couple of games, especially on Sunday, where he laid his body on the line, trying to get in there on the goal line, the way he cut it loose, just how he's been decisive in his decision-making, I think these guys are finally starting to respect him and feel like he's earned that spot where back when Frank Reich came in, they gave him the spot as the number 1 overall pick. Heading into the season, it felt like they gave him the spot where those guys allegedly saw Andy Dalton, felt like that's the guy that we need to lead our team. But now they've seen Andy Dalton play and they've seen Bryce grow, and he should be the quarterback. So we'll see if that's how it works out. Of course, again, we're doing this before that announcement's likely going to be made, so y'all would know. But hey, good conversation either way, and you know how we feel prior to the decision even being made. But looking defensively, I don't know what to look at. This team has been terrible defensively this season, and this is a big reason why I didn't want to see Brian Burns go out the door. You were already last in sacks, last in pressure rate last year without him, and what do you know? You're worse as far as sacks and worse as far as pressure rate this year without Brian Burns. I don't know how much better it gets, but the hope is that DJ Wonnum, who the Panthers actually signed before Jadeveon Clowney to be the replacement of Brian Burns, can be someone who can help him out as he was on PUP. He also had a blood clot in his arm after having surgery on his quad, which is just something that's unfortunate to hear. He was not able to play up until 2 weeks ago, where he came and started practicing again. And the expectation is, at least from David Newton of ESPN.com, he'll make his season debut on Sunday. So that is really the big defensive story. The Panthers are getting help on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not sure whether it's going to be enough help for them to, I don't know, be a passable defense, which they have not really been for most of the season.
Yeah, I mean, look, the defense for the Panthers, I mean, it's the same situation with the Giants. You've got to play complementary football.
Yes.
And I don't, from afar, it doesn't look like that has been the case for the Panthers, as it hasn't been the case every week for the Giants. And when the Giants have done it, they've won. The 2 games that they won, it was like almost the perfect game because all 3 units contributed. But when you have the breakdowns, when you here and there, they add up, and you have the record that you have, So, but yeah, I look at the Panthers defense, and I'm really not sure, and maybe you can answer this. Where exactly is the strength of that defense?
Oh man, JC Horn, I suppose, at corner. But other than that, like Mike Jackson made a game-winning play on Sunday on Cedric Wilson on just a terrible play call. It's 4th and 5, and the Saints are throwing the ball 30 yards down the field on a fade route. I don't understand that at all from Clint Kubiak. I guess it would be JC Horn is the strength. It's not the defensive line. They give 191 yards rushing again on Sunday against the Saints. They're the worst rushing defense in the league. Linebacker, they lost Shaq Thompson, but Trevin Wallace, the rookie's coming in. He's played pretty well. Like, there isn't a strength. This is just right now a bad defense. And the hope is, like last week in that win against the Saints, they held the Saints 2 for 4 in the red zone. The Panthers offense went 3 for 3. Like that was the game right there. New Orleans, I'm sure you saw the stats, had way more yardage than the Panthers had on Sunday. And it became the first team in 20 years to lose in that scenario where they had plus 150 yards total more, like plus like 150, like rushing more in 1-to-turnover battle. And now it's 275-1 in the last 20 years of those occurrences happening in the NFL. So there's not a strength. The hope is that they can find a way to get the stops when they need to, bend but don't break. That's really what they can expect, or at least hope for, in the remaining games this season. So that's the Panther side of things. We talk about the Giants side of things. Let's take a look at the 3 things each of these teams must do in order to win on Sunday as they face off at 9:30 over Eastern time and 3:30 local time here in Munich. It's Locked On Panthers. It's Locked On Giants. The Locked On NFL crossover Thursday, presented by our friends over at Prize Picks. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Speaking of bets, yeah, the Giants were at 5.5. I saw it the last look on Monday, down 4.5. Just amazing. Vegas has no faith in the Carolina Panthers, even though they came off and got a win. And the Giants, they're thinking about possibly benching Daniel Jones. Either way, I'd maybe betting on New York if I were you. All you got to do is just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get over $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, back here on a Locked On NFL crossover Thursday. It's Locked On Panthers, hosted by me, Julian Council. Locked On Giants, hosted by her, Patricia Trena. And we are breaking down this Panthers-Giants matchup here in Munich, Germany on Sunday. And 3 things the Panthers and the Giants have to do. Again, crossover Thursday is presented by our friends over at Prize Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Patricia, we'll start off with you and the visiting team, even though both teams are visiting, and talk about what the 3 things the Giants have to do. Now, typically I say the Panthers got to do more than 3 things because they're not a good football team. They got to do a lot more than just these 3 things. But what 3 things are you looking at where they have to do it in order for the Giants to win on Sunday?
Well, I'm going to think big picture here as opposed to matchups and whatnot, because the teams are, both teams have their issues. So I'm thinking big picture. Number one, the Giants' confidence has got to be restored in some way, shape, or form. They say that they're still confident. They still have, we're going back. We're going to chop wood. We're going to get ready, fix the mistakes. I need to see it, because there are times when you watch this team on the field and you say they're lacking confidence, because look, you keep getting beat, you lose your confidence. It does eat away at you. So I need to see confidence. I need to see Daniel Jones be more than just a game manager, which is what he has been primarily this season. I need to see the pass rush wake up. They went to sleep last week against the Commanders, as I mentioned earlier in the show. They've got to wake up, whether it's Bryce Young, whether it's Andy Dalton. The pass rush has got to get after the quarterbacks. They've got to force mistakes. They've got to force turnovers. They can't beat themselves. The Giants at times have beaten themselves with mistakes. So play a clean game, play complementary football, and just, look, the two teams are pretty much evenly matched, I would say, except for a position here, a position there. It comes down to who's going to make the fewest mistakes, who's going to play with more confidence, and who's just going to want it more.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. You look at these two teams, and you mentioned that like they are pretty evenly matched. And typically, especially at the NFL level, where all these games are typically one-score games, and the Panthers actually played their first one-score game of the season last week in that 23-22 win against the Saints. It comes down to just not turn the ball over. And I would have told you a week ago, the only way the Panthers win a game is if they win a turnover battle. And they did not win a turnover battle last week, and that was the first game they were able to win, because the only game that they had won so far this season had been against Las Vegas on the road, where they didn't turn it over. But looking at this game from the Panthers' perspective of things, you got to let Bryce Young cook. And I'm sure someone out there is cackling right now by me saying let Bryce cook. But we have seen him grow in confidence. We have seen him in this offense the last 2 weeks. Dave Canales, if he's going to let him play, has seen an opportunity to let him grow and use his strengths. Why not let him sit back there and cut it loose? We saw a couple times on Sunday the throw to David Moore that should have been a touchdown. David Moore dropped. The throw to Xavier Legette, which was taken away by New Orleans and turned into an interception, when really, that's, called a fumble instead. Bryce Young should not be credited for that turnover at all. There's some good passes. Then on that 3rd and 10 on the final drive, sat back there, took a 3-step drop, let it rip, 26 yards, helped set up that winning touchdown. Like, let Bryce Young just go out there, show confidence in him as he's having more confidence in himself. Got to get pressure. And I know that this has not been a great team as far as getting pressure this season. I can see some vulnerabilities there with the Giants offensive line. Daniel Jones is somebody who is known to have some whoopsie daisies when it comes to taking care of the football throughout his career. So if you can get some pressure on him with DJ Wooden coming back, and again, doing this before the end of the trade deadline, Jadeveon Clowney still around, having those two guys out there for the first time this season would be great as far as getting some pressure. Then the last thing to me, defensively, they're not going to be a turnover machine. They're not going to be able to get a bunch of stops, but bend, don't break. They got stops in the red zone last week. They were able to go punt, end of turnover on downs, the final 3 drives there against New Orleans on Sunday, albeit a banged-up New Orleans Saints offense. If they're able to bend, not break again this week, I think they have an opportunity. So got to be able to get some pressure on the quarterback, let Bryce Young cook, open up the offense, and we'll see what this game looks like on Sunday as the Giants and Panthers face off in Munich again. The Giants right now are favored. Any final thoughts, Patricia, before we get out of here?
Predictions you want?
Yeah, predictions, final thoughts. If you want to go, I have no prediction. My prediction is everybody's going to have fun.
There's going to be a barn burner, right?
Yeah.
No, the last thought I want to say is, both teams are coming in, I think, Thursday night. I know the Giants are flying in Thursday night. One thing that I'm going to be looking for is energy level. And I guess, I think the Panthers are also coming in Thursday night, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I think energy level is kind of an X factor, if you will, here. Brian Dable, when he spoke to the media on Monday, he said, we're leaving Thursday night, sleep on the plane, then hit the ground running. Julie, because you just made that trip, that's not easy to do. You've got jet lag, and when you're sleeping on a plane, unless you've got those recliners, and even that is kind of, not the most comfortable thing as sleeping in a bed. So I'm curious to see what the energy level looks like, how, the players respond, flying for a number of hours, that can dehydrate you. So these are all things I'm sure the Giants and Panthers have taken into consideration, but which team is going to have more bounce in their step would be, the big thing for me to watch. And as far as a prediction, I don't even want to go there because I haven't gotten it right at all this year. But I will say this, I'm not picking the Giants. I will not pick the Giants until they give me a reason to believe in them again.
And that's totally fair. And yeah, made the trip, got in this morning here on Tuesday at like 11:40. And look, I bought the seat where I had a bunch of leg room there on Lufthansa, and I was able to recline back, and I got like an hour of sleep. And I'm 6'1", so I cannot imagine like Robert Hunt or Dexter Lawrence on a plane, how those guys are going to be able to sleep and be comfortable. And I get they're probably going to have a way better setup than I had, but still, like, it's not great. And I'm running on fumes, and I still have hours left to go in this day just to be able to get on Munich time and be able to wake up the next day and feel fine. So best of luck, because they're going to practice on Friday, and I'll be out there, and I'll be very curious to see what the energy levels are at Panthers practice and Giants practice as both these teams prepare for their Week 10 matchup here in Munich. But that's going to wrap up this edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Giants podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Subscribe and follow our shows for free on YouTube and wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. If you have not already done it, I'm Julian Council. She is Patricia Traina. We'll be back again on Friday, breaking down more of this matchup. Then, of course, we'll be here after the game, breaking down the Panthers and Giants game. So, again, check us out here on YouTube, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and take care.